COP27 is starting today, right? And everybody is talking about that. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to hear many conversation around that. The different developments, what's happening, not happening, is it good, not good? But one thing I kept hearing before, right, even been asked a question, was the question of wondering whether this COP, right, the COP27 happening in Sharm El Sheikh in Egypt, was going to be Africa Cup. I wanted to have a conversation regarding that, right? Because I don't know, what does it mean to be Africa Cup? Maybe some of you are not clear about that, right? I wanted just to look at this topic and look at what are the issues around and figure out whether or not it's going to be an Africa Cup, and giving you the tool for you to judge and assess yourself whether or not it would be a success or not. So my name is Tony Tiu. I'm the founder here of Renewables in Africa. So we are your global clean energy champion. And our job is very simple. Is to make sure that we can demystify the renewable energy sector for you, so that we make it seamless and easy for you to connect. And you can connect from different places, angle, right? So you could potentially be an investor and say that I like to invest into the sector. Everybody's talking about COP. I heard about COP26, COP27 this year in Egypt, COP28 in Abu Dhabi, I believe, next year. So how can I be part of it? How can I put my money there and support the initiative and project? But I'm missing some crucial information. This is the reason we're having this kind of conversation, right? You and I, in order for us to discuss about that, for you to ask questions, and for me, hopefully, to bring you all the clarity that you need, right? That's what it's all about. Or you could be a business, because business plays a big role, an enormous role, right? Industry, very important. So they may be saying, we know that we are at the moment contributing to rejecting a lot of CO2 emission into the atmosphere. But we like to change it actually. We like to play our role. But we also want to know what are the information that we need to know in order for us to decarbonize if we have to do so. Or a professional saying that, I know people are always talking about the skills needed into the sector. People are always talking about the fact that if we're going to be tackling this challenge, we need to have a lot more talents and competences coming on board, right? And I want to be part of it because I believe that I have some skills I'm convinced will be helpful for the industry. I just don't know how to approach it. I'm just missing some information. This is why I'm saying that for us having those regular conversations, hopefully I'm helping you to tackle all of those questions, right? That's what it's all about. So today I want to talk about COP, right? COP, and trying to figure out whether this will be an Africa Cup or not. First of all, let me just say that for some of you that may be a little bit hesitant and not sure about that, let me clarify that this is not the first COP that happened in Africa. In fact, this is actually the fifth one that's going to be in Africa. So the first one, it was COP7. It was 2001. It was in Morocco. So the second, it was COP12 in 2006 in Kenya. And the third one was COP17 in 2011. It was in South Africa. The COP22, which was the last one we had before the one we're having just right now, it was COP22 2016 in Morocco. So as you could see, in terms of having this symbolism, the COP coming to Africa, we've done it already, right? That's already done. So most of the time now, if we're talking about the Africa Cup, most likely people are talking about the content, figuring out whether or not this cup is going to respond to African needs and also emerging market needs. Yeah, I guess that's the spirit behind these questions. By the way, as I'm talking to you, let me just say that I forgot to mention that, but for some of you watching us, I just wanted to know that we actually broadcast from 5 platforms. We have LinkedIn, we have YouTube, we have Twitter, we have Telegram, we have Facebook. So what I'd like for you to do ideally is to connect to all of those platforms. But if there's one in preference that you prefer to look at, do it, right? Not a problem. If you're on YouTube, for example, make sure that you subscribe and you press the notification button so that whenever we have a new video, you are aware of it. And after that, when you subscribe, I like you also to leave a comment. Just for example, I'm talking about that. We're talking about COP. I like to find out what is your opinion about what I'm saying. Would you agree, not agree? Do you have a comment you want to share? Just want to say hello? Because a lot of people also just connecting just to say hello. Please feel free to do so. Or maybe that's the last thing. So I want you as well to share this video because there's a lot of people not aware of us having this regular conversation on a Sunday. It's not just Sunday. We're also talking on Wednesday, but also Friday. But today is Sunday, right? And I know for some of you, for many of you, it's actually quite convenient because you're sitting at home like me and you can spare another 20, 25 minutes, half an hour just talking to Tony, right? That's what it's all about. So let's coming back now to the topic, right? Feel free to drop a comment, like I said, and share, please share. Do that for me, please. So if I come back to the topic, so basically what I've clarified for you already is the fact that no, this is not the first COP that is happening in Africa, just in case some of you were a little bit hesitant. And because some of you as well know that but what I can say though, it's the more time is passing, the more people become aware of this conference of parties, which is what COP actually means, right? And it becoming more and more popular. And also because of the pressing issue of climate change, where we start seeing the consequences, everybody can then appreciate that. That's the reason, I guess, this event that happened, like I say, a long time ago, started gaining more into importance. Now, for me to look at the COP and to understand whether or not we can equate that to an Africa Cup, meaning that it actually will address the needs of Africa, right? What are the requirement that Africa wants to address? So it's important to understand exactly what is actually at stake, right? And you probably all remember that the last COP was in Glasgow, in the UK. And out of this COP26, there was a number of commitments. And I just wanted to come back to the commitment because that will help us to appreciate whether or not we can actually name this COP as Africa Cup. So let's talk about the requirement that we had in Glasgow, right? And to see what some of those requirements are likely to be tackled or not, right? That's what we're talking about. So in Glasgow, there was a number of pledges, initiatives that were taken, right? But let me just mention four of them, which I believe can definitely help us to make our opinion right now. The first one was emissions, right? So what was agreed at the end of COP26 was that all the countries was going to go away, especially the biggest emitter, right? They were going to go away and they were going to come back this year with, let's say, more aggressive pledges for cut in terms of emission. We're talking about carbon emission, CO2, right? Which is the greenhouse gas, which causing the climate change, right? What is the most damaging as far as we're concerned. So they were going to come back with, let's say, stronger pledges, right? And not only stronger pledges, but also a plan, a credible plan to demonstrate how they were going to do that. So that's what country agreed to do. So is it what they're going to be doing right now? Let's see. But what we're saying is actually here, if they can't do that, clearly we could see that obviously that commitment would not have been met. And the idea of those emission cuts, this is the fight to make sure that we can keep the temperature rise, for 1.5 degree above pre-industrial levels, right? So that's what we're talking about. This is by 2050. That's what the Paris Agreement says, right? Paris Agreement, which is like the biggest agreement everybody working against, right? Because before that you have the Kyoto Protocol, and now the latest one is the Paris Agreement. So the second commitment, because I mentioned four, I said there's four that we want to talk about. The second commitment, it's coal. So you remember, or maybe not, I don't know whether you were paying attention to the conference last year. So it was actually, I would say, the first time in a COP that there was an explicit plan to reduce the use of coal, right? Coal, which is responsible for about 40% of the annual CO2 emissions. So clearly we needed to tackle that. And there was the first time that people come together and say, hey, yes, we recognize that this is the biggest emitter, one of the biggest emitter, we want to tackle that, right? A country was going to make sure that they have a plan to reduce it. And initially, the plan was to come up with a text which is saying that coal was going to be phasing out. Obviously, sort of the last hour before the end of the conferences, so they changed out for down. Phase down as opposed to phase out, right? That was after the intervention of China of India, and you know why? Because those are two emerging markets, and they're clearly using a lot coal for the industrialization. So the third commitment was to look at the climate finance. In fact, climate finance, you may or may not know, but I'm sure you heard about it. So it's that fund, right? The climate finance is all the finance that is meant to to support initiative that to combat climate change. That's what it is. Just to make it simple. And the idea was to increase money to help poorer countries to cope with the effect of climate change, yeah, and to make the switch to clean energy. So there was a commitment that was made in 2009. That was Copenhagen, in the COP Copenhagen, for rich country to actually contribute to the level of $100 billion a year, right? So to help those countries that need help, I'm talking about those let's say developing countries to get to grip with the effect of climate change and switch to clean energy, right? So has it been done? So that I can definitely already talk to you about, and the answer to that is definitely no. And let me just actually show you a very quick picture here, so that you can see where we are. So 1 second. Excellent. I have it with me. Brilliant. Okay. So I'm sharing here the picture of what the contribution has been, between 2013 and now. As you can see that we've never reached 100 million, since the 2009. The idea, the commitment was to reach the 100 billion by 2020, 100 billion contribution by 2020. As you can see, 2020 we were actually also just 83 billion. And now, when we left Glasgow, because actually I was in Glasgow, so the commitment was to make sure that by next year, that means 2023, the 100 billion are met, right? As opposed to 2020, which was 3 years later. So that's what the commitment was. Yep. Come back and stop it here. Yes. And the last commitment that I want to talk about here is the fossil subsidies. So leaders as well, world leaders as well, agreed to phase out the subsidies, right, that is given to fossil fuel, because those subsidies are responsible to artificially, and that's what people don't know actually, to artificially reduce the price of coal, oil, and natural gas. Because I know most of the time the challenge was, for example, for sources like renewable energy to meet or to match fossil fuel, on the consideration that it was going to be a way to create a level playing field, right, where everybody's competing on the same level. But what people don't know, fossil fuel receive a lot of subsidies already. So the price that you're seeing, they clearly already artificially low. But I don't want to jump on this debate, right? That's another debate. But those are the 4 commitments I can think about that came out of Glasgow, right? And out of those 4 commitments, so I can definitely say that 3 of them was a particular interest for Africa. So the emission, because Africa is a low contributor at the moment, it's not the biggest, I would say, a preoccupation for the continent. But definitely coal, because we have countries relying a lot on coal. For example, South Africa, which is the biggest industrialized country into the continent, but not the biggest economy. And climate finance, obviously very important, and fossil fuel subsidies. Those 3 are very interesting, yeah, for Africa. And we're going to see, obviously, what is the position of Africa with regard to that. So those are the 4 commitments, right? So meaning that for COP27 to be considered Africa COP, it needs to kind of address those requirements that are of importance for Africa, right? And the reason I wanted to say that is because until we understand that, it's sometimes difficult for us to see whether or not it makes sense, or whether or not we have a good appreciation of certain questions. That's the reason I wanted to make sure that I debrief that for you, so that you all very clear. So I'm hoping you're all very clear. So if you have any questions, please just drop that in the chat, and then I make sure that I'll address it. Otherwise, continue, because I will assume that at the moment everything is clear so far, right? Excellent. So those are the requirements that we have for COP26 in Glasgow. Now, let's come back to what happened. What happened since COP26? So a year makes a big difference, and a lot of differences, right? And you already know, yeah, you have an idea, all of you, of what happened. So let me again mention 4 events, right? But there are many more that happened. But let me mention 4 that by themselves already giving us an idea of what happened. So we definitely had a big food crisis in Kenya, right? Affecting more than 30 million people in the country. That's probably why you had the Kenyan government, especially with the new president, so William Ruto, who actually passed and took a very historical decision by allowing GMO crops to be used into the country. Because as you know, there was a ban on them for some time. Why? Because the idea was to make sure that they can tap into the issue of hunger that was caused by food crisis, consequences of climate change, right? So that's something that happened in Kenya, in Africa. You had flooding in Pakistan. So everybody could see that, right? Huge flooding. And Pakistan is still recovering from that. And it would take them a long time to do it. Where we have 30 million people affected and more than 1.5 million homes also affected. Everybody could see that. And it's not like Pakistan was the first country to experience such an event, extreme event. No. Before, a couple of years ago, we had Mozambique exactly in the same kind of situation, right? So this happened. And then we had a heat waves in Europe, terrible, right? Clearly disturbing, the services, way of life in Europe. And all of a sudden, people actually took that a little bit more seriously. So I start thinking, if we're going to have something like that on a yearly basis, we definitely got to be looking at this problem more seriously. And then the last one, much more recent, all of us know about that. Impossible to ignore it, just because as well of the focus all the media have on it, and also the impact it's having in the world, in the economy, the war in Ukraine, with the huge big energy crisis, inflations, so oil and gas prices off the roof, transferring to food, bringing on a food crisis as well. So massive. So all of that happened. Food crisis in Kenya, flooding in Pakistan, heat wave in Europe, war in Ukraine. And like I say, just an example of event that happened. Clearly, when you see things like that, it shaped and changed the positions of many countries, especially the way they were looking at the world at the end of COP26, right? That's important. And clearly that had an impact. What also happened, which I also want to mention, it's more the fact that not for one, I would say we have to applaud them for that. So the continent of Africa decided to come together to voice a common position with regard to the issue of climate change. And what does that common position say? That common position says that the continent, is stipulated that the continent will continue to deploy all form of its abundant energy resources, including renewable and non-renewable, to address the energy demand. Because Africa clearly has a big issue of energy access. So the idea is about how do you find the right compromise between meeting the challenge of energy access. Everybody needs to have access across the continent, and also moving toward a just transitions. And the continent come together and say, we want to say to the world, we want to say to investors, we want to say at COP that we want to be able to use both renewables and non-renewable sources. You're probably going to ask me my opinion about that, because I've been asked a question. So what do you think about a common position? I'll say that common position for me, it's understandable and not surprising, especially if you were following what was happening ahead of it. And I've been part of many conversations, attending many conferences, talking to some of them. So it wasn't a surprise at all for me. And it does make sense, put it that way. I just have some caveat just to make sure that I also want to see what guarantee that they would give. I'm talking about the African representative. They would give to make sure that at some point in time, we do accelerate towards a more decarbonized system that we have into the continent. And by the way, as well, so you probably know that I have already made a couple of live videos regarding this topic. I'm not going to come back to that. So yeah, I just want to say, the common position of Africa is the one that I have mentioned. Yeah. So when we now hammer this all of that and unpack that, so These COP27 is going to be an Africa COP if the COP27 can respond to the issue of, as I say, coal. So how do you tackle that? Because clearly Africa would be on the side of China and India. I can't see Africa saying that, okay, we're completely going to phase out coal immediately. You're probably going to be asking for, I would say, a gradual removal of coal, right? So the COP should deliver on that if it wants Africa to be happy. That this is what I'm saying. You definitely want to look as well at the issue of the fossil fuel subsidies, because if you look at the common position of Africa, another way of saying that is Africa is saying we want to be using renewable and fossil fuel, just as simple as that. That's what the continent say. So if there is anything that goes against this position, they won't be happy, and it will not be considered as an Africa Cup, right? And the last one is the climate finance. Are the summit gonna finally deliver on that, right? Because ever since it was taken as a decision that was a commitment from rich nation, it has not been met. Yeah. And Africa is saying we want to become as industrial as you guys are, but we can't get that much constraint, especially taking into account that emissions are not basically our legacy responsibility, although we still have to take that into account, right? So that's what the content is saying. You have to dissociate that with what I'm saying. This is what actually the content is saying. And the most likely the biggest issue or biggest questions of this COP, as far as I could see, and not just I could see, many people are saying that, the question of loss and damage fund, right? What is loss and damage? For some of you who may not know, maybe I've heard of it, but not clear what it means. You have a lot of people living in countries that have contributed to contributed the list, to the greenhouse gas emission, for the last 200 years. And it happened that they are the one that hit the hardest, from the effect of the pollution, right? Because I was looking at a article recently, you would say that out of the 20 countries the most affected, I think about 16 or 17 are in Africa, for example. But Africa, like I say, is the least responsible for that, right? And there's other countries outside of Africa, Pakistan, for example, we mentioned that, yeah. And in the Caribbean, you also will mention that, yeah, where they also have big effect. So you're having those countries that have not caused the challenge, struggling the most, yeah. And people are leaving crops, they are leaving livestock to drought, they are being displaced from their home due to the rise of sea levels. They're losing places of worship. They don't have access to their indigenous territories and so on and so forth. Essentially, what they're saying that they want the rich countries then to come together and set up that loss and damage fund to compensate them, right? Or to help them to tackle that, to cope with that, right? And at the moment, so from the rich nations, for example, the EU and the US, they are agreeing to discuss about this idea, but at the moment, they don't want to commit to that so far. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one country, for what I've heard, that has officially said that they're willing to do something, and they actually suggested a $30 million contribution on a yearly basis, and it's Denmark. And that's what Denmark has said, yeah, recently. And beside Denmark, there's two regions in countries. There's one region in the UK, Scotland, and then another region in Belgium, Wallonia, who's apparently also willing to do something like that. But the rich nation have not done it. Why? Because I guess at the moment they could see the sheer scale of the effect of climate change, and they are afraid that if you look at those damages and loss, cost, it will amount to trillions. And that's why you need to come back to the situation where we are right now, where many economies go into recessions, times are going to get tough. So all those big nations tend to be looking at the domestic economies, yeah. So it will be difficult for them, and it's difficult for the voters to sell that, they're going to be spending $1 trillion helping other people. So that's something that you need to bear into account. Yeah. So loss and damage funds. So is it going to happen for this COP? I don't know. I'm not very optimistic because at the moment, from what I could see, the let's say developing nation want a specific fund to be set up for that, just to tackle that, not to join it with $100 million, for example. But the rich nation want something that is coming together, right? Because it's easier for them to say it like that. So is it going to happen? Don't know. Another issue, two couple of issues that I can mention very quickly is the issue of adaptations and resilience. Adaptation, because there's no measures to tackle climate change. Essentially, two: you have mitigation to avoid things from happening, and adaptation. So how do we deal with the situation once we've already had some damages, some effect, and we know already that our way of life has been changed, especially in Africa? How do we adapt to it? Yeah, it means that you need to have the money to be able to cope with it. So it's important for Africa, and also the resilience. So how can we develop resilient societies, resilient economies, in order to be able to tackle the challenge of climate change? So those are the questions that would be important for the continent to get an answer from, and a satisfying answer, right? So if it's not satisfactory, so I'm not sure that they'll be happy about that. So this is what I wanted to share with you to understand what are the different questions that needs to be addressed to figure out whether or not this is going to be an Africa Cup, right? It's important for me to say that. I could see there's a Paul who say hi. Hey Paul, good to see you. Hi as well. So let me just share your question, share your message here. Yeah. Hey Paul. Hi. So if you have a question, just let me know. Otherwise, take it. It's okay. So I just want to wrap up and sort of saying that I've given you a broad understanding of what the question is with regard to the COP27, right? So what the different questions are. But what is actually more for me, and hopefully for you to realize, is for you to understand. Okay, these are the discussions that's going to happen. You have negotiators, the big guys going to do it for you. My question is, you watching me, how are you going to respond? What are you going to do at your level? Because the collective response that we will have will also come from the individual contribution that each of us can make. So what are you going to do? Especially if you have your business, how are you going to adapt? How are you going to adjust? How are you going to contribute? And if you happen to be in the industry and you happen to have excellent solutions or services that definitely help people moving in society moving forward, are you making sure that people are aware of your solution in order for you to get your product, your service known, in order for you to get the lead that you need, in order for you to make the sales that you need to keep your company afloat? If you have it, that's great. If you're not, just reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about our awareness program, which is helping people doing just that, making sure that they get the visibility they want in their awareness as well. They get the leads that they want, and they get the sales that they want. Yeah. So that's what I could say on these questions. If there is any question, I'm happy to take that, but I can't see any questions. So I take it that things are clear for you guys. So apart from that, yes. So you have a fantastic COPs. It's going to be 2 weeks, very, very busy. So I will be attending, but only virtually, right? Into the COP. That's what you can do it. So if you're not there physically, you can also be there virtually. Yeah. So but the idea is to make sure that we all doing our best to get the world to move in the right direction. Okay, excellent. So I don't think any questions. So I'll take it that is all clear, and you're all content and happy, guys. As usual, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you. Yeah, I can't wait to catch up with you on Wednesday. Wednesday is gonna be very interesting because I told you already. So we're gonna have an entrepreneur, a company, solar supplier, yeah, solar home system supplier in DRC Congo. I don't want to tell you more about that. Just want to make sure that you are there and you could attend it, right? It's going to be at 5:30 BST time. Guys, make sure that you're there, and looking forward to seeing you guys. Take care, guys, and as usual, may the sun be with you guys. Bye.